us. Today is Matthew 24. Now let me just start off by saying, Matthew 24 and the preparation to teach Matthew 24 has undoubtedly been the hardest chapter that I've experienced in a long time. It's a chapter for which there's been given a lot of attention. It's not the only book in the Bible that talks about the end of time at all. There's obviously the book of Revelation is a book with John's revelations written. We've got the second book of Thessalonians, where Paul talks about the man of lawlessness in the end of time, and how people were responding to the coming of Jesus, what they felt was the soon coming of Jesus. I got to tell you, I really appreciated Jerry's sermon. There was one point that he made, and I wish I had written it down, but basically he said, we need to quit worrying about our calendars and start worrying about, he didn't say worry about, but we need to start working, keep obedient, keep faithful. And I would just tell you that we're going to go through this, and it's going to be hard. Conceptually, it's going to be hard. But I think the bottom line is, what he said was with regard to the end of time. Jesus said nobody knows. And so when I start seeing literature, and it was a number of years back, the very popular series Left Behind, okay, which, just looked into all the signs, et cetera, and, year in and year out, we've got somebody predicting when the end will come. And I just want to say, it's a bunch of bunk. It's just a bunch of bunk. We've got to stay with the calendar. Does not matter. What matters is that we stay faithful and we deal with the realities, which sometimes are harsh realities of life, okay? Which is that we stay true to who we are called to be. Now that's, if you don't get anything out of today, I want you to hear that, all right? Now, the sheet that I gave each of you this morning is not so much about Matthew 24 as much as it is about two concepts here that I think that you need to have in mind and have some clear idea or unclear idea, just an idea about what they might mean. Okay, there's two words. The one is at the very top. It's called apocalyptic. Can you say that word? Apocalyptic. Okay. And then there's another word at the bottom that I put. It's called eschatology. Okay, eschatology. So we've got two big words. Rick, they're tough. But the top word, apocalyptic, from which the word apocalypse. Okay. And if you watch the news and you hear this often, in fact, with the earthquake that occurred in Venezuela, I heard the newscaster say it was apocalyptic. Okay, apocalyptic. And so, just a couple things I want to introduce you to with the word apocalyptic. Well, as we're going to look at it primarily, it is a genre. It is a way of writing. There's numerous genres that are in your Testament. We have books of history that are written in the genre of history as it was written at that time, which is very different than our time. Our history today is written very, what's the word? It's written linearly, okay? It's written by history, by dates, okay? At that time, history was written primarily in terms of who won. The guy that won is the guy that wrote the history. Some people argue that's still the case, but we're still much more linear than they were, okay? So there's books of history. There's books that are written that are books of wisdom, the wisdom literature. There's books that are written that are very poetic, very poetic. There's certainly the gospel writings that are written, that they're different kind of writings. The epistles are different kinds of writings. And then there are the writings that are very apocalyptic. And when I say apocalyptic books, those would be like the book of Daniel. Has anybody read Daniel recently?
Yes.
Well, let me just tell you, those that hadn't read Daniel, if you want to read a book that sounds like a little fairy tale action going on, okay? It's got bad monsters, bad animals, bad stuff, and at the end, God sends the Son of Man, and the Son of Man deals with those bad monsters, and the Son of Man is at the side of God, okay? There you go. That's Daniel in a nutshell. That's very apocalyptic. Another book that would be very apocalyptic, and the way it's written is the book of Revelation. Right? This discourse that Jesus has, the way it is written, there's apocalyptic language here. Big part of that is because he's quoting Isaiah in it, Isaiah 6, Isaiah 7. He's also quoting from Daniel, hence apocalyptic writing. Right? Now, let me just read a couple of my notes. Let's go over a couple of my notes on apocalyptic. I put a genre involving total destruction, widespread devastation, or the catastrophic end of the world. Well, that's kind of a modern way of looking at what it is to be apocalyptic. Historically, it meant the revealing of hidden truths that previously were kept secret. Apocalyptic was a type of writing that revealed a truth, and generally in our book, in our Bible, it's a way of writing, very poetic, full of symbols, etc., that gives a truth generally about how God will be victorious over what is evil. Okay? Apocalyptic literature often features highly symbolic visions where God triumphs over evil. And then I wrote down just this modern usage that when we read or when we hear apocalyptic now, we think in terms of massive disasters. All right? So just bear in mind what we hear today as disasters, that's not exactly what we mean when we say apocalyptic literature, which is a genre. And we'll get more into exactly what that looks like, okay? Well, I've got a note, how to read apocalyptic literature. Just understand, when you read poetry, when you read literature that's poetic, can you read that just in black and white? It says what it says. How do you read poetry? It's got some imagination, right? And you have to kind of interpret what the poet means. It's not written like maybe some of us speak to each other, right? It's not written so plain. In Scripture, apocalyptic literature is about revealing the truth of the future, like a revelation, which is what Revelations was. Isaiah 6, God gives Isaiah a divine perspective of what's coming. It's even apocalyptic in the sense that Paul, on the Damascus road, saw a light, okay? And he received an apocalyptic vision of what had been and what was to be. A heavenly perspective on an earthly situation. Multiple stories in your Bible that are truly apocalyptic in that sense. Now, I want you to skip the little section there on apocalyptic literature and drop down to the word eschatology. Because eschatology is a word that is specifically, theologically specifically, is a study of last things. It's the last days. It's the end of time, all right? So you understand that apocalyptic literature is simply a genre about the way you say something. Right? Eschatology is about the end of time. So put those words together as apocalyptic eschatology, and somebody will think you're smart. But think of that as just a particular literary genre about the end of time. Okay? Now that's what the big words mean. And it's important that we understand that this kind of language, that this kind of writing, sometimes we read in our Bibles. And that's what 24, I think, is. So if you read 24 and you read 24 in a very literal way, I think you're going to come out wondering what in the world is going on. But if you can read it as apocalyptic eschatology, there's that big word, okay? If you can read it in such a way, then it starts to make some sense. And we're going to try to do that here. All right, do I have everyone here totally confused now?
Absolutely.
Good. Join me. All right? So now let's read through this chapter, and let's just kind of ask some questions as we go through. So Jesus comes out from the temple. He's going away when his disciples came out to point out the temple buildings to him. Who has been to Washington, D.C.? And who has walked through Washington, D.C. and marveled at those great old big buildings, okay? And what would you say if you were walking through those great buildings that represent, in many ways, everything that our country is, all right? And Jesus is walking through you, and Jesus looks, and Jesus says, hey, they're all coming down. There's not going to be one stone, one brick on top of the other. What would you say?
Traitor.
Yeah, probably. And what would that represent? I mean, what would it represent for all that to come down? What would it represent for the temple? What would it represent for all those massive buildings that were there in Jerusalem? Okay? What would it represent when they came down? Well, it would look like the same thing that had happened to many, many other kingdoms. Look like the same thing that had happened to Nebuchadnezzar's capital. Look maybe like the same thing that happened to, name me another, yeah.
The same thing that happened to Venezuela this week.
Well, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about Venezuela. I had in mind some ancient leaders, okay? But they would be down, okay? And it's a matter, that would be kind of the end of their rule, the end of their thing. So Jesus answered and said to them, "Do you not see all these things? Truly I say to you, not one stone here shall be left upon another. All of it's going to be torn down." And he was sitting on the Mount of Olives. Now, if you've been there, and Margaret and I have, some of you others have, if you're there at the temple, you kind of walk down the little valley, the thing's called the Kidron Valley, and then you come up on the other side, and you're at the Mount of Olives, okay? And you can kind of look from there, and you see what was the temple area. Right now, you're looking at this big golden dome, but anyway, you see the temple. And the disciples came to him privately. So I'm thinking, they heard Jesus say this back there. You know, in general, Jesus has known what he's talking about. You got my curiosity up, Jesus. Tell us, when will these things be? When is that going to happen? First question. And the second question, and what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? Now, some people want to make three questions out of this, okay? Most commentators feel that there's two questions here. There's the question of when is this catastrophe going to happen there to Jerusalem, okay? And the second question is two things said together. What will be the sign of your coming and what will be the end of your age? And they see those things as the same, okay? When Jesus comes as Messiah, okay, when the end of this age, when the end of the way that things are right now happens, when the Messiah of God comes, when is that going to happen? Two questions. And Jesus answered and said to them, "See to it that no one misleads you." Now, let me just interject something for a minute when you look through this. One thing about apocalyptic writing, this kind of writing, is it's hard sometimes with apocalyptic writing to know whether they're talking about a present or soon coming event or whether they're talking about some event in the future. Okay? And I'm going to just preview this for a moment. There's two or three events that people argue this might be talking about. One would be the fall of Jerusalem that happened in AD 70 when the general Titus came in and, I mean, absolutely destroyed Jerusalem. destroyed it. 87. Some people think, in fact, that Jesus was talking about the end of time as we see it when he comes back. Okay? So when you read through this, you got to kind of think, which is he talking about? And the bottom line is, because I've read it about 5 times now, you can't tell always. Okay? You just don't always know, which is the point of apocalyptic literature in that genre. Verse 5, many will come in my name saying, I'm the Christ, and will mislead many. You'll be hearing wars and rumors of wars. See that you're not frightened, for those things must take place. That's not yet the end. For nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom, and in various places there will be famines and earthquakes. But all these things are merely the beginnings of birth pangs. Now, I just want to ask for a moment, outside of the verse 5, where people are saying, I'm the Christ, which incidentally had been happening probably for a number of years with people that had come into that area saying that I'm the Messiah, most of whom were crucified, killed because of their rebellious acts. But outside of that, the business of wars, rumors of wars, nation against nation, famines, earthquakes, are those new happenings? Those have been happening since the beginning, haven't they? Verse 9, then they will deliver you to tribulation, they will kill you, and you will be hated by all nations on account of my name. That sounds like something a little bit in the future. That sounds like a persecution to me, doesn't it to you? And at that time, many will fall away, will deliver up one another and hate one another, and many false prophets will arise and mislead many. And because lawlessness is increased, most people's love will grow cold. But the one who endures to the end, he shall be saved. What end are we talking about? We talking about the end of Jerusalem? We talking about the end of time? What are we talking about? And this gospel, this good news of the kingdom shall be preached in the whole world for a witness to all the nations, and then the end shall come. Yeah, Rick.
I've always read verse 12, at least, verse 13 is, the one who stands firm to the end will be, in other words, to the end of your life.
Okay.
That's the way I read that.
Yeah. I think that's fine to read it that way. I think, I don't know, Rick. I don't know. I don't know it's to the end of time, to the end of, until Jerusalem falls, until the end of your life. I don't know. 14, in this gospel the kingdom shall be preached in the whole world for a witness to all the nations, and then the end shall come. Wonder when that happens.
Nobody knows.
I sure don't. Verse 15.
Paul in Colossians 1, I think about verse 12 or so, says that the world has been preached to all nations under a creature, and that's before the destruction of Jerusalem. So that's interesting.
Yeah. Verse 15. Therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation, which was spoken of through Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place, and then my Bible has parentheses, it says, let the reader understand. Now, what's going on right there? What do you think is going on right there? All right, y'all have a red line Bible? Y'all have red line Bibles? My Bible has, therefore, when you see the abomination of desolation, which was spoken of through Daniel the prophet standing in the holy place, that's all in red. And then I've got in black parentheses, let the reader understand. Wonder who put that in there.
Mine's in red, which is interesting.
Well, we need to go out and burn that one.
I
What?
Must be a denomination.
What do you think about that? How about if Matthew is writing his book Matthew, okay? And how about if he's quoting Jesus, but he wants the reader to be keyed in on something really special, okay? So we've got Jesus right there quoting out of Daniel. He talks about this, what's it called?
Abomination of desolation.
Abomination of desolation, okay? Where in the world do you get the abomination of desolation, okay? Daniel talks about that. And Matthew clues us in. He says, maybe to understand this, you need to look back at Daniel, okay? Maybe that's what you need to do. And that's why I mentioned Daniel in the very beginning. Because Daniel talks about this abomination of desolation, which is kind of one of the awful things that's going to happen. And the Jewish people had looked at a number of things that could be the abomination of desolation. When Alexander the Great took over the area, and then he went up dying of diarrhea, okay, probably. Then he had his boys take over. And one of his boys that took over was called Antiochus Epiphanes the Fourth. I just made that up. No, I didn't. Antiochus, or Antiochus, if you're from the South. Epiphanes the Fourth. And one of the things that he tried to do was to Hellenize these people. Hellenize is just a fancy way to say make them Greek. In other words, make them not Jews anymore. Okay? And one of the ways that he felt like he could appropriately do that was take some of their ideas about temple worship and just desecrate them, degrade them to nothing. Okay? So there's a big deal about what you can offer as a sacrifice there. And a great sacrifice to be offered, okay, was a pig. Now, Antiochus, he puts a pig out there, okay? You think that was an abomination of desolation?
Definitely to the Jews.
The people thought that, okay? And some people think that's exactly what they're talking about. So there's multiple ideas of what the abomination of desecration might be. Yes, you know.
Well, no, but I have in my, just written down that possibly it could be maybe a statue of Zeus or something like that too.
Yeah. There's another story. One of the Roman emperors, was it Nero or was Caligula before Nero?
No, Nero was first.
Caligula was after Nero. I'm thinking, Ralph, that he wanted to put a big statue of himself there in the temple, okay? And the idea is that people would worship that as opposed to worship God, okay? Because after all, they were into being gods if they were emperors, okay? So there's a number of potential desolations that are out there, okay? But again, when you mention this, when Jesus mentions this, you go back to the whole Daniel story, which again, I told you, was about basically these creatures, these beasts, that man was made to rule over, that dissuade man, and in fact wind up ruling over men, such that men become like beasts, okay? And so you have these bad boys that are beasts, that start representing countries, okay? And Daniel sees multiple countries that are beastly in how they've acted. And it all culminates in the big bad beast that is really tearing the world all apart. And the only thing that can save the world is for the Son of Man to come and put the beast where he belongs and then reign beside God, okay? Which incidentally, just to throw this in, we talk about Jesus the Christ. When Jesus described himself, more than any, he described himself as the Son of Man. Okay? Jesus had read Daniel. Okay? And the people would have understood what that meant when Jesus referred to himself as the Son of Man. Yeah.
You know, you talk about this abomination and this apocalypse, and I just think through the centuries, people have believed that the end of time was coming because of the signs that they were seeing over and over and over.
Yeah.
And that it's been repeated. And that's why it's so, I guess, we should be so careful to say that the end of time is coming. Because even present day people are saying,
Yes.
you know,
Yeah.
the end, you know, these are the signs.
Again, Jerry said this morning. if we get less interested in our calendars and more interested in the way that we're living our lives, okay? Knowing that nobody knows, but it's coming, okay? And when it comes, we who are prepared, we're taken care of. Yes,
Well, Jesus himself even said, I don't even know.
we're gonna get to
Only the
that.
Lord
You're
knows."
spoiling the end of the story, the end of the chapter.
Steve, did you sing
Yeah.
that song, Jesus is coming soon?
Jesus is coming soon.
Troublesome times are here, filling his heart with thousands of
How
years.
old is that song though?
Older than me.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
you've been singing that one for a while.
You think we ought to be singing that song?
We should be singing it.
Well, I think when we talk about the stuff going on in Daniel, the focus needs to be not on what desecrated the temple, but what happened to the people after the desecration of the temple. Because that is the abomination. They lost access to sacrifice. They lost access to forgiveness of those sins. Well, forgiveness, it was really more of a
Yeah.
pushing back. And so they lived in constant fear of separation from God.
Yeah.
And so that is the abomination, not just the desecration of the temple, but being separated from God.
The abomination that leads to abomination.
And I think that is probably what Christ is referencing more in this situation, is we don't need to allow ourselves to be separated from God. When you talk about all of the things he talks about, the things that cause people to fall away. So I think he's referencing that time, because until the Maccabee Revolution,
Yeah.
what it's called, they didn't have temple access. And so they were very, very afraid. That was the emergence of like the Pharisee way of life, trying to achieve perfection, because they could not give sacrifice.
Yeah.
So I think that is what he's focusing on, is the separation from God.
Yeah. So I wrote down the 3 abominations that people typically think about, which was the 167 with Antiochus, which incidentally led to the Maccabean Revolution with the hammer, okay? And then 70 AD, Titus taking on the temple, tearing it down. And then I wrote also the future Antichrist, which I ain't gonna do that today. But anyway, there's some ideas about what that might be, but thank you for that point.
Steve,
Yes, sir. Yes.
I love exactly what Rachel was saying.
Uh-huh.
If you back this up a little bit, it says that this is on the heels of the lawyer, what do I do to inherit life?
Yes.
Then about the 7 woes to the Pharisees and
Yes.
such as that. So all this is building upon the fact that your worship is not in this grand, glorious building,
Yeah.
that your worship is in the heart now,
Yes.
and you will not be separated from God.
Yes.
As the abomination.
There you go.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Very good. Very good. You should have taught this class, buddy, the 2 of you. I would have, about last night at 10 o'clock, I would have gladly let either one of you take it on. I was in a state of confusion. All right, so 16, Matthew says, pay attention to what Daniel's got to say. Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains. Now, again, are we talking about the destruction of Jerusalem that's coming? We're talking about the end of time, okay? Some of this, to me, seems pretty clear. Let him who is on the housetop not go down to get the things that are in the house. Let who's in the field not turn back. But woe to those who are with child, to those with nursing babies in those days. What do you think about that, Shirley? It is pretty tough when you're doing that sort of thing. No pediatrician that's on call. But pray that your flight may not be in the winter or on the Sabbath. For then there will be a great tribulation, such as not occurred since the beginning of the world until now, nor ever shall. Now I will just say, that language may well be apocalyptic in and of itself, okay? The business of, it's terrible, it's the worst that it will ever be. Well, I don't know that. I mean, if you go back and you start looking at kings in the Old Testament, they'll describe a king, the greatest that was ever, until the next one comes along. Hezekiah, he's the next one that was there. So, I just don't know, okay? Again, a lot of this is poetic, a lot of this,
In the time frame for this generation,
that's right, that's a good thing to say right
for
there.
them, it's the worst thing that's ever gonna be for them.
I'd say so. 22, and unless those days had been cut short, no life would have been saved, but for the sake of the elect, these days shall be cut short. Then if anyone says to you, behold, here's the Christ, or there he is, do not believe him, for false Christ will arise, signs and wonders, so to mislead you, even the elect. Behold, I have told you in advance. Now, verse 26, if therefore they say to you, behold, he's in the wilderness, do not go forth, or behold, he's in the inner rooms, do not believe them. For just as the lightning comes from the east, and flashes even to the west, so shall be the coming of the Son of Man be. Again, very Daniel-oid, okay? Wherever the corpse is, there the vultures will gather. Boy, this is a great one to read. Nice bedtime story here. Okay, 29. But immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will give its light, and the stars will fall from the sky, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Well, again, very poetic. Read it as such, okay? Read it as such.
I
And
have a
then
reference there for Isaiah 13.
that's exactly where he's quoting it, right out of Isaiah. And then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in the sky. And then all the tribes and the earth will mourn, and they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of the sky with power and great glory. Now, you think he's talking about Jerusalem in the fall there?
No.
Seems like he's kind of mixing stories here, right? That's kind of what you do with apocalyptic literature, okay? And he will send forth his angels with a great trumpet. They'll gather together his elect from the four winds and from one end of the sky to the other, okay? Don't ask questions yet. Verse 32. Now learn the parable from the fig tree. When its branch has already become tender and puts forth its leaves, you know that summer is near. Now this particular fig tree did not get cursed, okay? Even so you too, when you see all these things, recognize that he is near, right at the door. Truly I say to you, this generation will not pass away until all these things take place. Now, that's very interesting. 34. This generation will not pass away until all these things take place. When Jesus talks about a generation, or when we read about a generation in Scripture, what does generally a generation mean in years? 40 years. You go back, kind of about 40 years. So look, if I'm calculating that Jesus was killed when he was, what do we think most? What do we think Jesus' age was? Huh?
33.
33, and we're thinking Jesus was born
33 years old.
What'd you say?
33 years earlier.
33 years earlier. Desolation. Let's say that Jesus was born about 4 BC, okay, and that he died 29-ish, okay. 29 and 40 would be what? Huh?
69.
69. And when did Jerusalem go down? 70. You see kind of how my mind is thinking? Now look here, I'm not telling you y'all got to interpret it this way, but that's how I read it, okay? Jesus thinks that Jesus don't think, Jesus is prophesying that I think Jerusalem's going to be devastated within that generation. That's what I think Jesus is saying. And again, you got to be a little careful teaching a class like this. I've told y'all before, I don't mind sharing my opinions. In fact, I don't mind sometimes sharing my opinion in a forceful kind of way, all right? So, you know, you got to stand your ground sometimes. Yeah, Randy.
Josephus, in his writings, note that Jesus' followers fled Jerusalem in light of this very thing. You know,
Yes.
and when you put this in the Hebrew text, the book of Hebrews, why their love growing cold, why they're going back to Judaism, again, it was about patriotism. It was about, you know, if you were a good Jew, you know, what are you doing following Jesus? You know,
gotta believe, historically, this is grounded in some real history, right? That's what we think. Okay, so verse 35, heaven and earth will pass away, but my word shall not pass away. But of that day and hour, all right, read this one back on the back. Verse 36. But of that day and hour no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, nor the Son, but the Father alone. Okay? I mean, just circle that one. Nobody knows. Which in my way of thinking is, quit trying to figure it out. You're not going to figure it out. All these signs he's talking about, great, you see them. It ain't going to help you one bit knowing when the time is. For the coming of the Son of Man will be just like the days of Noah. And how were those days? In those days, which were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, they were marrying and giving in marriage until the day that Noah entered the ark. And they didn't understand until the flood came and took them all away. So shall the coming of the Son of Man be. Then there shall be two men in the field, one will be taken and one will be left. Now, you know, what's that language? Who picked up on that? That's the rapture idea, right? Okay? And I'm just telling you, got to be careful what we do with some of this, all right? I mean, I think you just got to be very, very careful. Two women will be grinding at the mill, one will be taken and one will be left. Therefore, be coming. He would have been on alert and would not have allowed his house to be broken into. For this reason, you be ready too. For the Son of Man is coming at an hour when you do not think he will. Just an aside here, Matthew, to me, his encouragement to us to be ready is very much about, I don't use the word threatening. It comes across to me as a little bit of a little threatening language, okay? Bad things are going to happen, so you better be ready. Mark, to me, we won't do this, but Mark paints it as a little bit, it's a softer thing. Hey, God is coming. Be ready. He's coming to take us. It's a happy day. At least that's how I read it. You can compare them on your time. Verse 45, who then is the faithful and sensible slave whom his master put in charge of his household to give them their food at the proper time? Blessed is that slave whom his master finds so doing when he comes. Truly I say to you, he'll put him in charge of all his possessions. But if that evil slave says in his heart, my master's not coming tonight, and shall begin to beat his fellow slaves, eat, drink with drunkards, basically be a sinful slob, the master of that slave will come on a day when he does not expect him, in an hour which he does not know. And then 51, we have some of that very graphic kind of language, the bedtime story, shall cut him in pieces and assign him a place with the hypocrites. Weeping shall be there and the gnashing of teeth. That doesn't sound so good, does it? So 24, there again, it's a tough chapter. Maybe, like I say, maybe the toughest one that I've taught in a long, long time. Go back to the middle of the page that I hand you out on apocalyptic literature. Just read through that with me a minute. And I used the example of Daniel. And if I can read my writing, it says, extended dreams and visions that are written in poetic, imaginative style with many images based on biblical design patterns. And I wrote down just a couple of examples that when Jesus wrote, the people that he wrote to, so many of the people that were hearing Jesus talk, I don't guess Jesus wrote a lot, but Jesus, what he had to say, all right? There are a lot of metaphors, etc., that Jesus uses that they would have understood. And I just wrote down a couple of metaphors. So if you go back to Genesis, when you read about the sea, is that a positive or a negative experience per se?
Negative.
Negative. I mean, who lives in the sea?
Leviathan.
Leviathan, okay? And Leviathan represents chaos, okay? So when we start reading about that sort of thing, we think about disorder and chaos. On the other hand, there's the idea of dry land. What is dry land? In the very beginning, God separates the dry land from the waters, right? That dry land is very representative through the Testament of rest, ordered, a safe place for us to live.
What is Leviathan? What is Leviathan?
Leviathan is a sea creature, a mythical sea creature that was really bad. It could swallow your ship. Oh yes. A really bad boy.
That's what was written
If
about
you
in-
caught him, you needed to cut your line. Okay?
That's what's written about in Job, brother.
What now?
It's written about in Job, brother.
Job refers to Leviathan, but I think Leviathan is in some other scriptures as well. But it is in a lot of the ancient Near Eastern literature where you can read about the sea monster. Okay. What have I got here? Oh, I put down Revelation. Just to comment on Revelation. Hard to talk about apocalyptic eschatology and not talk about Revelation. Now, I know we're not here to study Revelation, but I just wanted to just make a comment. John has this vision, but the death of the world and all the bad things that are happening to the world is really about the renewing of God's creation. It is about our hope for the future. That's really what we have in Revelation. And then I've got my notes to the side, which I scribbled to myself after I read it and think, oh, I should have thought of that. The first thing I had circled were the 3 abominations that I think you could think about. The stories of Isaiah, the stories of Paul. There's multiple stories throughout our Bibles that are apocalyptic in nature. They give a guy, it's kind of a proleptic of what's coming, okay? The beast, talking about deceived by the beast. I think it's a pretty neat thing when we consider the imagery of beast and we go all the way back to Genesis and we think about the creation of man and one of the things that man is told to do. He basically, they're to procreate. What is the difference between man and beast? What's the difference?
Man has a soul.
Man is made in the image of God, and in bearing God's image, what is he to do? What is he to do? He's to rule the beast, okay? He's to rule the beast. And there again, if you follow what so much of the prophets have to say, their language is very much the language of the beast, okay? Overcoming man. In fact, if you look at the serpent story in Genesis is really about a beast that crawls on its belly, and what does it do? It deceives, okay? And when people allow themselves to be deceived by the beast, then what do they become? They become a beast, all right? And how does that beast behave? Beast behave very badly. And so you have the prophets depicting the beast as countries many, many times, okay? And you can look historically and you can think about those countries. That's how the scripture is written. And again, that is very poetic. It's very, very apocalyptic, and it plays very much into eschatology. And those are my big words for the day. Any questions?
You know,
Yeah,
the-
or comments?
You know, the idolatrous idol is part beast, part man, the stuff. And every country, you know, has their animal. You know, ours is the eagle, Russians the bear.
Yeah.
and
Yes.
so on and so on.
Yeah, very, very interesting. I think the big word for that is anthropoid. Is that the word? Is that the word? Y'all know what the word is? But if you look at all multiple godless nations through history, you'll see, and I think about, as much as anything, I think about Egypt. I think about the crocodile, okay? The crocodile kind of got that Pharaoh look to him with, you know, the snappers on him. Yeah.
You know,
Very interesting.
in Revelation, is the lamb that roars like a lion,
Yeah,
you know,
Yeah.
using that
Yeah.
for us to get it. So,
yeah, yeah.
said he heard the voice of a lion, and when he looked, it was a lamb that looked like he'd been sacrificed, that had been raised.
Yeah, and I gotta figure out what to do with that. I've made all this big deal about we being more than beasts and how bad beasts are, but you got Jesus being depicted as a lamb. What am I supposed to do with that? I gotta think through that, how to present that. You'll figure that out for me.
I'm gonna say, well, what's that movie, what did she do?
The sheep detectives.
Sheep detective?
Yeah, the sheep detectives.
Don't have your feet on.
I took Colin's boy, Cooper, to see Sheep Detective, okay?
I thought you had.
Yeah, and I enjoyed it, and so did he. So I'll just tell you, if you want a good
Yes.
grandparent, grandkid movie to go see, I mean, that'd be an okay one.
It's on TV tonight.
It's on there, but don't stay to
See it on TV now.
That's right, that's right, that's right. Sheep Detective. You don't get anything out of it today, get that. All right, anybody else, any more? I prefer you not ask questions. I prefer you just make a comment. Is the chapter hard for you all? Yeah,
I went 4 years to David Lipscomb in high school.
yeah.
We had 4 years of Bible.
Uh-huh.
The senior year, the girls were in with all girls class, and the boys were in all boy class.
Oh.
I had no idea what the boys discussed other than all the men in the Bible.
I know what they were
Women
talking
did all-
about. Anyway, go ahead.
The girls' class was the women. And we never once, in the 4 years I was there, discussed Revelation. Never.
Well, hey, well, Lane, you know, Jerry mentioned something today that we don't talk very much. I'll just tell you, we don't talk much about chapter 24, period, okay? It's hard. And, you know, I don't know that getting chapter 24 is gonna be essential to anybody's salvation here, but it's an easy chapter to just kind of read through and not think another thing about, which is generally is what I've done. But I'll just bring up one other thing that we can mention. Jerry mentioned the word millennial this morning, millennial. Now, how many of you all understand premillennial, amillennial, postmillennial? Got that a little bit? You want to explain it to me?
It has to do with where you place your understanding.
Say what now?
It has to do with where you place your understanding. It's very hard to describe, but when you have a certain school of thought, you're placed in a certain category without going into great detail. But
Okay.
I think a lot of us are post-millennial, I think is what we call it.
Most of us are amillennials.
Amillennial?
Yeah, if you're raised in the Church of Christ, whether you know it or not, you were an amillennial for the most part. You didn't put a lot of stock in all that, the 1,000 years. Basically what you did, if you're raised like I was raised, you believe just what Jesus has taught right here in 24, I believe he's taught, which is Jerusalem fell. There are a lot of problems with Jerusalem falling. And now what we look forward to is a time when Jesus comes back again, okay? And we don't put a time frame on that. There's not 1,000 years. There's not, he's going to come back, we're going to reign 1,000 years with him. There's none of that, okay? It's that when he comes back, we got eternity to look forward to with him. That's kind of,
Then the premillennial tribulation is gonna happen before Jesus comes again. Post-millennial tribulation happens, and then Jesus finally shows up to save the day, kind of thing.
Is that it? I don't know.
I think that's kind of pretty close.
with that, we will leave it.
Very simple.
I've heard those terms tossed around for years, and I've just been like, whatever. I don't have to identify with one or the other.